We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self-development and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter.
Welcome everybody. I'll start cold. I want you to think about a man of 22 who stands in a North London studio in the summer of 1970 and sings both halves of an argument. He drops his voice for the father and he lifts it for the son. Nobody else joins him. The whole generational rupture the song is supposed to be about takes place inside one throat. And that's the detail I keep returning to. Not that Cat Stevens wrote a song about a father and son who cannot hear each other. Plenty of people have done that. What is unusual is that he performed it alone. And that he later said the reason was simple. It was him talking to himself in two different states of mind. Now this opens a question worth following. When you finally break away from the people who raised you, who exactly are you arguing with? Stephen Dimitri Georgiou grew up above a restaurant in Shaftesbury Avenue in the theatre district in the Greek Cypriot family. His father, Stavros, ran the place. The family called him Stevie. He was surrounded by theatres, and by his own account, the geography shaped him. He wanted to write a musical before he wanted anything else. In 1969, he was doing exactly that, working with the actor and writer Nigel Hawthorne on a stage project called Revolution. I got that right. Set during the Russian Revolution, obviously, going by the name. There was a large political story of the last Tsar and his family, and running alongside it, a small one about a farming family in the countryside. The son in that family, named Sasha, wants to leave and join the uprising. His father wants him to stay on the land. Stevens wrote a song for that scene, and he was clear about the father's motive when he described it 50 years later on the podcast Song Explorer in January 2021. The father loves the boy. That is precisely why he wants him to stay at home. Then, out of the blue, the project died, and it died in a way that matters to the song. Stevens contracted tuberculosis and was admitted to King Edward VII Hospital in Midhurst in West Essex. He was gravely ill. He spent months in hospital, suffered a collapsed lung, and spent roughly a further year convalescing. Sources differ on whether the collapse belongs to the late 1968 or 1969. So I'm not going to pretend to be precise when the record doesn't support that. What is not in dispute is that a young man in his early 20s spent the best part of 2 years in a bed, and that Revolution never happened. Now, the song actually survived the musical. It went into the studio first for the album Mona Bone Jakin, and Stevens didn't like what came back, so he left it off. He recut it at Morgan Studios during the sessions for Tea for the Tillerman, recorded across May to July 1970 in 3 London studios, with Paul Samuel Smith producing the album. Alan Davies added the backing line that arrives late in the song and cuts across both voices. The album came out on the 23rd of November 1970 on an island in Britain and on Island Records in Britain and AM in North America. Now, there's a small irony buried in how the song reached the world at all. Stevens and his manager were looking for backers for the musical. One wealthy man they played it to was not interested, but knew Chris Blackwell at Island Records. Blackwell listened, and when they got to his particular song, Stevens says the man's jaw dropped. Blackwell offered him a recording contract. The song about a young man leaving his father's plans behind is the song that took Stevens away from his own. And there was a real father in the background, though Stevens had always resisted the straightforwardly autobiographical reading. Stavros wanted his son in the restaurant. When the 17-year-old signed a record deal, his father tried to talk him out of it. Speaking to Chris Isaac in 2009, Stevens put it plainly. His father was running a restaurant and he was a pop star, so he was not following the path his father had laid out for him. But there was no antagonism between them. He loved him and his father loved him. Interviewed by the magazine Disc soon after the song's release, he offered something more interesting than autobiography. He said he had never really understood his father, but that his father always let him do whatever he wanted to. He let him go. And then the line that reframes the entire song, it is for the people who cannot break loose. Now that's a really important point. So it was never really a report from his own life. It was written for the ones who couldn't get out. So let me stay with the fact of a single performer singing both parts, because I think it is the most psychologically loaded thing about this recording. And Stevens has told us how it was done. He shifted the octave for the son and up. He shifted the octave up for the son and down for the father. One instrument, 2 registers. He also said the writing was not hard because there had always been 2 sides of him. The side that wanted to get out and do things and the side that rather liked things as they were. That description almost exactly maps Hubert Herman's account of the dialogical self. Okay, and this came out in Culture and Psychology in 2001. Herman's, drawing on William James and on Mikhail Bakhtin, proposed that the self is not a single core, but a set of propositions or positions, each of which can speak and between which genuine dialogue can occur. You are not one voice with intrusive noise. Essentially, you're a small society, and the voices in it can argue. Now, this is also relevant to, say, for example, Gestalt therapy, where we often work with, the top dog, underdog, and have a conversation between the two. Similarly, Eric Berne, the parent, adult, and child, and creating dialogues between the three. Now, Usually what gets us is the critical parent and the wounded child. Peter Bloss gave us the developmental machinery for this in 1967 in a paper on what he called the second individuation process of adolescence. His argument was that as adolescence repeats at a psychological level the separation the toddler achieves physically. Now, the young person has to loosen the internal parent, not just leave the house. Physical departure is comparatively easy, for some at least. Getting the voice out of your head is the actual work, and it can take decades. Now, here is where I want to be careful about popular misreading. The obvious lesson of a song like this seems to be that growing up requires rupture, that you leave and you leave hard. Now, interestingly, the research doesn't support that. Harold Grotevant and Catherine Cooper in Child Development in 1985 observed families in structured interaction tasks and found that adolescents who explored identity most actively were not the ones with the most separateness. What predicted exploration was a combination. The capacity to assert a separate view held together with permeability and mutuality in the relationship. Individuality and connectedness were not opposites. They worked together. For the boys in this sample, in fact, the link between family interaction and identity exploration all ran through connectedness. Now, if you reflect back on some of my other podcasts, you will understand that this is about safe attachment. Mary Bowen's family systems work names the same capacity from a different angle. Differentiation of self, in Bowen's sense, is not distance. It's the ability to hold your own position while remaining in emotional contact with people who disagree with you. Now, that requires two things. One, a good relationship with yourself, but also a strong sense of empowerment, of a reduction in anxiety or fear. The undifferentiated options are fusions, where you agree in order to stay close and cut off where you leave in order to survive. Both are anxiety management. They are not maturity. Now apply that to the song and something uncomfortable comes into focus. Neither man is doing it well. The father is not saying that he's frightened of losing his son. He's issuing advice. His counsel is compressed into a life plan. Wait, take your time, find someone, settle, and look at me as evidence that it works. The son is not saying that he is grieving or that he wants his father's blessing. He's saying that he's been made to listen since he could talk and that he has to go. Both men are conducting a conversation about love entirely in the language of instruction and departure. Now, anyone who has sat with fathers and sons in a consulting room will recognize the shape immediately. The content of the disagreement is almost never the problem. The problem is that neither party has a permitted vocabulary for what is actually at stake. John Bowlby's later work on the secure base is particularly relevant here, as I mentioned earlier on. And he cuts against the romantic reading of the son as a heroic escapee. Bowlby's point was that exploration is not the opposite of attachment. It is what attachment makes possible. The child who ventures furthest is the one who is confident that someone reliable is behind him and has his back. Now, this returns us to the disc interview. Stephen said his father let him go, and then said the song is for those who cannot break loose. He is describing, without the vocabulary, the difference between leaving from a secure base and leaving without one. And then there is the moment in Morgan Studios that Stevens has described more than once, and which I particularly find the most striking thing he's ever said about his own work. He was singing the son's part, reaching for the son's anger, and what he heard coming out of his own throat was the timbre of his father's voice. His father was Cypriot, with what Stevens called a strong Mediterranean passionate side, and you knew when he was angry. So the anger the son needed was already available because it had been learned from the man being argued with. He said it was strange. Actually, it's more than strange. It is what internalization actually feels like when you catch it happening. It's the body is inculcated with it. It's the introjection. You reach for the part of yourself that is most defiantly your own, and you find your father's hand already inside it. For a lot of people, and originally for myself, quite an experience. Shocking initially. Speaking to Rolling Stone in 73, he extended the thought. Some people assumed he had taken the son's side, and he rejected that. He could not have sung the father's part if he had not understood it too. Listening back, he said, he heard one line and realized it was his father's father's father, and so on back through the generations, speaking through him. Against this project's 7 psychological functions, the song's primary work is recognition. It gives language to an experience most people have had and few have a script for. It also does transformation in a modest and precise sense. It makes leaving thinkable by letting the son say out loud that he has to go. And by 2020, it acquires a third function, reconciliation. And I'll come back to that. Now, Britain in 1970 was saturated with talk of a generation gap. It was in the newspapers, in advertising and political rhetoric, and it was also at that exact moment being taken apart by researchers. Vern Bengtson published a review in Youth and Society in 1970, arguing that the rhetoric of generational rupture and the measurable differences between generations were two different things, and that they were routinely confused and at times confabulated. There were real differences. The apocalyptic framing around them was largely a cultural product. What is notable about this song is that it declines it really does decline the apocalyptic framing entirely. There are no villains. The father is not a tyrant, and the son is not a rebel with a cause. The father's argument is that he was once the son, that he knows what he's talking about, and that the boy will still be here tomorrow while his dreams may not. That is a real argument, offered from real experience, and the song doesn't mock it. The class and migration frame matters too, and it's really discussed. A Greek Cypriot family running a restaurant in central London in the 60s was doing something specific. Building security in a country the parents had come to as outsiders, an experience I'm well aware of in my own family history. In that setting, the family business is not merely a job, it's a whole project. The evidence that the migration worked, the thing that will hold everyone if everything goes wrong. A son who leaves it is not just choosing a different career, he's withdrawing from a collective insurance policy. Whether Stavros experienced it that way, I can't tell you. There's nothing that I could find. And I will not guess. But it is the structural situation. And it changes how the father's caution reads. Prudence looks different when you have already lost one country. There's also, interestingly enough, a gender dimension as well, and it's present in the song's surface. The father's entire prescription is settled in a masculine script: partner, marriage, patience, contentment offered as a proof of the method. It is care delivered as a plan. Both men are working within a form of masculinity in which advice is the permitted currency of love and direct statements of feeling are not on the menu. Neither of them ever say the plain thing in front of them. This is not a failure of the songwriting. It is the songwriting being accurate. This is how we are as men in the traditional sense, in the patriarchal sense. And I remember where the song began, with a boy who wanted to join a revolution. When the political scaffolding fell away, what stood up on its own was the family scene. That tells you which part was load bearing. The revolution was the occasion, the father the subject. Now, this is the time where I ask this question: why is it endured? Now, the song was never released as a single in its own right. It was the B-side of Moonshadow, and it has outlasted almost everything around it. Rolling Stone placed it at 408 in their 500 greatest songs list in 2021. Boyzone took it to number 2 in Britain and number 1 in Ireland in 1995. Ronan Keating recorded it as a virtual duet with Yusuf himself in 2004. Johnny Cash cut it twice, once rewritten for a father and daughter. Directors reached for it at funerals and homecomings, from Guardians of the Angel to the final episode of Ted Lasso. And the reason I think is that the song withholds its verdict. Most art is about generational conflict, wherein we eventually take sides. This one gives each position its best case and then stops, which means it cannot be outgrown. At 25, you hear the son, and you think the father's obtuse. At 55, you hear the father and understand with some discomfort that his caution was not stupidity. The song doesn't change. Your seat, your position does. The stage of development that you're in. Then in 2020, the 50th anniversary album, Stevens did something with it that no amount of critical writing could have achieved. He recorded the father's part at 72, and for the son, he used a live tape of himself singing it at the Troubadour in Los Angeles in 1970. Two voices, one man, half a century apart, in the same take. Now, interestingly, that was his son's idea. That recording is the reconciliation function made audible, not the resolution of the argument, because the argument doesn't resolve. Something better, the demonstration that both voices belong to one person across the lifespan, and that the older one has not silenced the younger. Now, this is confirmed by the last thing he said about it. Asked in 2021 whether age had moved him over to the father's side, he said no. He still waits for the son's part. He still wants to sing that one more, because in his voice, there are still things to march about. He also mentioned a small ambiguity in the lyric that he says he enjoys thinking about, where a phrase can be heard either as findings away or as going away, but he's never really settled which he means. Is it about finding a way, or is it simply going away? I would suggest that is not an accident of English. finding your way and going away are in this song the same event described from two ends of life. Okay, reflection time. I've got three questions here. First, when you play this song, whose part do you find yourself waiting for? Not who you sympathize with, that's not the point. Who you wait for. That is a different and more revealing thing. Second, if you did leave a plan, someone had made for you, what did it cost the person who made it? And did you ever let yourself know? Third, and this is the harder one, when you argue for your independence, in whose voice are you arguing? Whose cadence, whose vocabulary, whose way of ending a sentence? Now, over on Patreon, folks, there is a 30-minute writing exercise built directly on this episode's device, the two voices. It is a contained practice you can do with your notebook, with your journal. And one conversation, if you have someone to have it with. Ask a parent or someone who raised you what they gave up and whether they ever regretted it. Do not offer them advice. Remember, just ask. Then let the silence run longer than is comfortable. I'm Gunter Swoboda. This is Songs That Made Us, part of Inspiring Change, because art, science, history, philosophy can come together in a beautiful dance. So until next time, stay standing.
On this show, we talk a lot about living with purpose, slowing down, paying attention, and being intentional about the choices we make every day. Because when we simplify the noise around us, we can better hear what really matters. Empathy, connection, and showing up as the best version of ourselves. That's why I'm genuinely pleased to welcome our newest sponsor, Distill Union. Their philosophy aligns beautifully with what we do here. Distill Union creates slick, thoughtfully designed essentials, wallets, key organizers, phone cases, all built with a less is more approach. Their Wally wallets, Ferris key organizers, these are everyday tools that make life easier, cleaner, and calmer. In that simplicity, there's space for clarity. There's space for change. As a thank you to our Inspire Change community, they're offering 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. Have a look, try them out, and see how simplifying your day can open the door to something deeper. Visit distillunion.com and enjoy 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. That's distillunion.com with promo code Inspire Change to check out.
Hello to all our listeners. We thank you for tuning in and supporting positive social change, which makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general. And we are grateful that you have joined us. We want to extend a huge thank you to our listeners in Tillamook for bringing Oregon to number 10 on the top 10 USA listeners list. And to our global listeners, we extend our gratitude to our listeners in Zagazig for bringing Egypt to number 11 on our global listeners top 20 list for the first time ever. Congratulations! You made it to the top listeners list. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spigner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. If these stories resonate with you and you would like to engage more with Gunter and the Inspire Change team, please consider joining our Patreon community, where our members find bonus content and early access to video episodes. Membership awaits at patreon.com/Inspire Change. That's patreon.com/INSPIRECHANGE. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners. And most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.